it cracks me up how many of those guys dip and everything. In baseball, I saw it all the time because I used to cover the Pirates too.
Okay.
And of course, you expect baseball players to dip like crazy.
Oh,
but
yeah.
like Chase Claypool with a dip, and I was like, what? Really? Like Chase Claypool dips? He really doesn't. I guess Gunner gave him that dip as like a good game because
wow.
like that was his game ball, like the game dip.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Do you chew?
I went to Catholic school of Central Catholic, and freshman year I was chewing, and we had this prefect of discipline. This guy was like a former Marine drill sergeant, Mr. Wheeler.
Nice.
Took me to the bathroom. I had a fresh tin of Copenhagen. Said week's suspension or eat this. So he made me eat the thing, puked all over the thing, and honestly, to this day, I can't touch tobacco products. So. Son of a bitch, I guess, saved me, you know.
You always hear like most people the first time they chew, they puke anyway.
Oh yeah.
So I want to follow up with Chase and be like, dude, how'd that go? Like, how did that work out for you?
Yeah, I've tried a few times since. It just goes like right to my head, and no.
I never
feel
tried
better.
it. My dad does it. My father-in-law does it. My whole family actually basically does it. All the males in my family basically do it, but I never got into it. I've never even tried it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, it would give you a headache and probably
Yeah.
get a little nauseous.
Yeah,
you know.
it's
It's
funny.
hard to get rid of it out of your mouth. And when you start swallowing it, well, for me, kicks back traumatic memories.
Yeah, not the best, but yeah, it cracked me up to see Chase with a dip in. I was like, that's good, that's good. But yeah, man, you were talking earlier when you first came in. I definitely wanted to bring it up with you because I saw on your Facebook you were diagnosed with Lyme disease, which is just awful, man. How did this happen? How's this kind of been affecting you?
Yeah, it in early June, I had a couple bites on the back of my leg, and my girlfriend has a place up in Ligonier. We're always out in the woods, the dogs and stuff. Nice place to get out of the city too. And so we also had a couple other bites, and the ones on the back of the leg really itched, but they were kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like early June. Late June, I went to Boston on a vacation. And ate a lot of seafood and stuff. Came back, and my knee swells up to the point I can hardly even walk on it.
Mm.
So they're like, maybe you've tested me for gout. I don't have gout. Did MRIs, no problems there. Blood tests, whole 9 yards. So they can't really figure it out. They didn't test for Lyme's. So they shoot me up. We had this camp about to start, and so they shot me up with cortisone, kind of masked the pain. And then, still was not feeling right, fatigue, all the Lyme symptoms, throughout the camp and everything. And, it just flared up again, my knee, to the point like it was hard to walk on. So I went back to the guy and he asked me a bunch of questions, and I had a bunch of the other symptoms. And he said, are you out in the woods? And then it just all came together. So the test proved that I had it, and, just started the antibiotics. So knock on wood, these will kick it out. And,
That's crazy.
What's really scary is you think about how many people are misdiagnosed that have this. I mean, particularly with like fatigue and depression and stuff like that. And, instead of antidepressants, they should be on antibiotics, and then, I fortunately did not have the heart palpitations or Bell's palsy of the face, but there's probably a lot of people that go in with Bell's palsy. They think they're having a stroke. They probably inject them with, emergency stroke medication, whatever that may be. But, so it's scary. And, I would say to a lot of people, I mean, I really don't usually post that kind of stuff, but I'm just thinking about how many friends I have who have medical conditions, and they may want to get the test just because I just totally did not put two and two together. And, I guess it's pretty I mean, I guess Allegheny County is like one of the most common places in the country.
Our area, I mean, Pennsylvania in general is rampant with ticks. I mean, and Lyme disease, obviously. I like my whole family hunts. My whole life, we're big family. My name's Hunter. Like, it's no secret that my dad named me Hunter. He likes to hunt. But I've been like terrified of ticks. Like, thankfully we know about it because we hunt. We're always in the woods. Like, we understand. Like, dude, the second you get out of the woods, you have to check yourself thoroughly. But a lot of people don't know. Like, you would never think the average guy just go out camping, come home camping. Like you said, a bump on your leg, you probably thought it was a spider bite, a mosquito bite, just a random little bump. But man, the ticks, they terrify me. Like, spiders are fine. Like, a spider in the house, kill it, get rid of it. Doesn't really freak me out. Ticks gross me out, man. Like, I hate ticks.
It's nasty. And my poor dog had it too. And he just wasn't himself. And here, we're worried about him. And meanwhile, I wasn't feeling myself. So, maybe we got it from the same damn tick. Who knows, but it's fortunately it's nice to know what the problem's been and now just try to get through it. So and my friends that have had it said the antibiotics have kicked in various times, a couple days, a week or so, but they've all really haven't had any relapses with it, which is good. So
it's good. It sounds like you caught it kind of early, and I don't know how much you follow like the UFC or mixed martial arts at the highest level. Yeah, there was a fighter, Jim Miller. I don't know if you know Jim Miller, but
I'm not familiar.
He had or has. I guess you never really don't have it.
Yeah, I think it's dormant.
Yeah, he had. He got over it, but needless to say, there was a stretch in his fighting career. He's a huge outdoorsman as well, constantly hunting, constantly in the woods from like northern New Jersey.
Okay.
Maybe southern New Jersey. I don't know. Anyway, New Jersey. Like not the New York City, New Jersey though. Yeah. The woody New Jersey. Yeah. And he went through this stretch in his fighting career, several losses in a row, said in training he just fatigued all the time, and exactly like a fighter would think, I'm just tired because I'm training all the time and I got, kids, I'm running the gym. I'm just tired because I'm tired, and it's normal to be tired getting a little older. Turns out he had Lyme disease like the entire time. He was trying all kinds of crazy stuff. Nothing was working. And finally somebody diagnosed him correctly with Lyme disease. And like, I don't know if he took antibiotics or if he needed they do kind of like blood transfusions and things when it gets intense, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if he needed to go that far or not, but now he's literally still fighting to this day.
Oh, nice.
He's like one of the most active, if not the most active UFC fighters of all time. Like most wins in lightweight history. He's one of those guys that's just been there forever and constantly fights, a legend of the sport. So to see it affect somebody like that, man, the ticks, they don't care who you are. It's going to mess you up.
They don't. Yeah. And it's weird. It's a lot of times people get in the head. I had it in the upper back part of my leg, which you're not really looking at. So, it's sometimes out of sight, it's out of mind, but come back and kick it in the ass.
Well, I'm glad you got the antibiotics, and I hope that does kick it in the ass, because that's not something you want to be dealing with, especially in this profession, man. Boxing promoter, you're tired again. You're tired anyway, constantly stressing out. Yeah,
I know. And this is kind of a nice card. I do have one guy that I train who's going to be on this card, but he lives in Brooklyn. He's pretty much training there most of the time, so we're only going to get together a couple times before this fight. He's a pro debut, and he's a stand-up comedian there, so in New York. So I'm not sure how long he wants to do the pro boxing, but
what a combo!
Yeah, he went to Point Park here for undergrad in boxing. Was a really tough fighter, and just loved it and wanted to. I think he came and fought an exhibition on our last card at the Meadows.
Who is this?
Zach, the Serbian sledgehammer Petrovic.
Okay,
so
nice.
Real character. Heavy-handed fighter, and he's in a good fight this week. But that's the only guy I really have that I train on this card, and I will be working a couple other corners. But it's kind of nice to go into a card where you're not running a camp,
right?
And then also doing a card. It just takes so much out of you. So it's nice to kind of have a breather going into this one.
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic of boxing promotion. I've talked to Derek Gianta a lot. He manages and trains fighters as well. It's weird how in boxing you guys are involved on that managerial and training level as well as being the promoters, where in MMA, like we're not involved at all in managing the fighters, training, none of that. We just promote the fights and make sure everything goes smoothly, make fights. It's interesting. What's that dynamic like for you, being involved on so many levels?
Exhausting. It's very tough. But on the promotional side, we use it as a vehicle to try to get the guys on a bigger stage and, the televised fights, or get signed with a national promoter who's doing TV, which is, really the goal for us. But it's a lot. I think, though, if you look locally, fighters get to the point where they either, have to align with the promoter or do their own shows. Rod Salka did a number of shows himself and really built his record up well. And then, got big fights like the Danny Garcia fight.
Yep.
And I couldn't imagine being a fighter who's also the promoter of their own show.
Nuts.
I mean, that's just insane amount of pressure and stuff going into a fight. So kudos to him for doing that. But, it's, I do think like guys like Derek and I, we have, Derek has a lot more fighters than I do, but, we just have to keep him busy. And, certain times guys are hurt, other times they're not. Sometimes they're ready, sometimes they're not. So between the two of us, if, we consistently do shows. I'll put some guys on his, vice versa, and it's just a nice way for us to kind of keep them busy.
Yeah,
and it's worked out. So
the obvious question is the conflict of interest. Like, how do you navigate that dilemma, if you will?
You mean are guys fighting each other?
Yeah, exactly. Or just setting your guy up with a fight that he might lose, like making sure you're not giving your guys cupcake matches.
Yeah. Well, I like to kind of, in PA, Serb's pretty strict on the approvals.
He is.
So you can't have cupcakes.
We can definitely talk about that. Yeah.
So, but I think it's a good thing because if you have an undefeated fighter coming out of PA and most of their fights have been local, the bigger promoters will open their eyes to that, in pro boxing anyway. I'm all for local guys fighting local guys, and I actually push it frequently. It's not universally welcomed or agreed. That's the way it should go. But if you look in the history of local Pittsburgh boxing, all the guys fought each other, and then there were good friends afterwards and stuff. So I like to push those fights. They don't always happen. Sometimes they do. Hopefully we'll see more of those. But I just think and I would have no problem having two guys that I manage fight each other.
Yeah.
Actually that will probably be happening down the road with a couple guys that we have because they're around the same weight.
It's inevitable at some point, right?
It's inevitable. And I think they help themselves to get to the next level. And if you put your guys in tough fights early, you kind of know what you have.
Right.
Rather than kick the can down the road for a long time, and see how they face adversity.
Yeah, the conversation of local versus local is very interesting because that doesn't happen in MMA either. Our Pittsburgh guys won't fight each other. Even if they kind of cross-train at a gym, they won't fight each other. Like, even if it's not their home gym, they don't want to fight a guy from that gym, which it's like a double-edged sword, right? Like, I can totally see where they're coming from. You don't want to fight a teammate. Like, there is a respect factor involved, and I respect that. But at the same time, it's like you said, the biggest fights would be when you do that. The biggest fight in MMA history in Pittsburgh was Cody Garbrandt versus Dominic Mazzata. And even though Cody's from Ohio, he was training in Pittsburgh. He was very well known in Pittsburgh. And Dom was a Pittsburgh boy through and through. That was local versus local. And that's why it was so crazy. And everybody loves it. But I don't know that we're ever going to see one like that again. So what do you think? Do you think that this is something that over time people might become more receptive to? Or should we just accept it?
Well, I think we got to push the issue to have them accept it. I think a little bit, but I think some of these guys will be forced to do it, later in their careers. It'll just be a fight that they can go out on their shield, make some money, and one fight, I keep bringing up his name, but Salka and Monty Clay had a great fight. Both of the guys were, the back end of their careers. But it was on a Sammy Vasquez undercard, and it was the fight of the night.
Nice.
Two local guys. Now, I don't know if they would have done that fight earlier in their careers, but at that point, why not? You know, and it really was a good one. So, yeah, I'm all for guys doing it.
So what is your background exactly? Because you can tell, like, you're a student of the game. You know the history of boxing, and particularly boxing in Pittsburgh. When did you get started in this?
Well, I grew up in Squirrel Hill, and Billy Conn was a famous guy.
What a legend, dude.
Yeah.
He doesn't get enough credit, by the way. I'm glad you brought up his name because he's a guy that people need to talk more about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he was a legend. And remember going to school one morning, and on the DV morning show, I think it was actually Magic 97, which was a popular morning show back in the day.
Just dated yourself a little bit.
I know. Late 80s here. But they announced that he stopped this robber in a burglary in Squirrel Hill. So I always thought that was like the coolest thing in the world, And then I went off to college, and our school gym, this is up in Vermont, was closed for a couple months. And then off campus, there was a boxing gym that had weights. So I went in there to use that, started competing, doing Golden Gloves. And then, just really stayed with it 30 some years since, more of a, cut man training. Now a gym owner, I've had a gym for about 11, 12 years. So really kind of done all the roles, never had a pro fight, but worn pretty much all the other hats. And I never really thought we were going to take on the promotion hat, but here we are.
Well, how did that happen? Because that's what I was just going to get to. Like, at what point does it turn into, I'm going to promote fights? Because that's a totally different animal.
Yeah. Well, we had been managing fighters, and we had the gym, and a lot of these promoters have their own fighters, and they get at the table first, which I totally understand because that's the way it is with us and with Derek. But it was hard getting these guys on some cards, and we had the Ukrainians coming over, and my partner JD just said, we got to start doing shows. I mean, it was just like, it wasn't something we deliberated about. We just really didn't have a choice at that point. So we dove in, and, we took a lot of lumps, and, it's hard to learn the business. And, we had 2 guys from another country that were very hard to match, expensive opponents, and now they both have, the fan bases, and, nice. It's really worked out. But earlier on, we had some good fighters that weren't necessarily big ticket sellers. So you have high expense, low income, and, it's a hard...
Not the best combo for a promoter, that's for sure.
No, definitely. So, we've learned, and we've done 15 shows now at, venues, really cool venues all over town. And I wouldn't rule out any of them to not go back to.
Nice. But, that's always a good sign.
Yeah, they were all great, and we have good rapport with them. And I think some of them we just kind of outgrew, or the location wasn't as good.
Yep.
But so it's been a lot of fun, and now we're going to this 15th or 16th show. This one. So
nice. So your show coming up October 29th at the Hollywood Casino at the Meadows, which is cool because we're having a show there the Saturday before this coming Saturday. I don't know when this will air, so if you guys are watching this and I said this Saturday and the show already happened, just forget that. But your show's coming up October 29th. What's this card looking like for people? Like, what gets you excited about this one?
I really like all the matchups on this, and we just added a female fight, Colleen Chaos Davis, who's 1-0 from Sharpsburg, fighting a debut from Toledo, Ohio, Clarice Morales. Tough Jamaican from a really good gym up there, and that's I don't really know anything about her, but it looks like a great fight on paper. So good 4-rounders. One of the regional matchup fights I'm really excited about is Lucas Adams fighting Zach Randolph. Randolph is 6-1-1, big puncher. Lucas is 3-1-2. But he just had a win over Mike Manna, an 8-rounder, and Lucas is a really tough guy, and Zach's a big puncher. So those are two, not two Pittsburgh guys, but Lucas is from Butler, Zach's from West Virginia, but 2 regional guys stepping up and taking a great fight. So I'm really, that's one of the sleepers on the card. I think could be one of the better fights. We've Keontae Irving, big puncher. He's fighting a guy, Brent Oren. Brent is this tall southpaw, has a win over 9-0 guy this year. So his record's a little deceiving. Not a great record, but he's been matched pretty tough.
Yeah.
And then we have Joey Turk, big fan favorite. He was in fight of the night on our last card. He's fighting 5-7 Andrew Satterfield, who's kind of been a regional tough journeyman heavyweight, and that's a really good fight. And then we have the Serbian Sledgehammer I mentioned earlier, Zach Petrovic. He's fighting a guy named an MMA guy named Isaiah Margheim. I'm not sure if that name.
Yeah, I actually don't know him, but now I'm going to need to look him up.
Yeah, we saw him fight at a show in Kentucky one time, and he lost a split decision down there. And it was a pretty spirited fighter, so
nice.
We brought him up. Matt Conway, popular local fighter. He's fighting in an 8-rounder for an ABO belt against Gabriel Smith. He's 11-3.
Nice. From
Houston. And Rosie Morales is fighting Jesus Ramon Perez, who's 15-14-1, but this guy is very dangerous. He's beaten a lot of, like this past year, he beat like a 21-3, and he's one of those guys that has been in with everybody. So this would be a great test for Rosie, and he's bringing undefeated record himself, 8-0, and has been looking really sharp. His last 2 fights, he's had first-round knockouts. He's been really training hard with his new trainer, Jay Rogers, out in Newcastle.
Nice.
So, yeah, those guys are doing a great job.
Yeah, that's a matchup like that for me personally is one that I get the most excited for. When you get a prospect who's undefeated on the rise and you can get him that veteran test, that guy that's already seen it all, like nobody will steamroll this guy. He's got to be on point. Like that's a really dangerous fight for Rosie. And if he gets through that, then I imagine that sets him up for a mega fight after that.
I agree. And he's, he's really hasn't turned down anybody we've thrown at him. and has just a great support network and a hard worker. So we're real proud of Rosie. He's been in there. And one other guy I want to mention that would have been on the card, but is Johnny Spell, one of our fighters who was tragically shot on the south side.
Oh my goodness.
5 times. And has made just a miraculous recovery. He's out of the hospital. He's training again. And, I still think he needs some time to, rehab this stuff. But, it's just amazing, his dedication and work ethic to get back into this. So
that's crazy to hear. When did that happen?
It happened, I want to say early September. I could be wrong on the dates, but they had it all in
Pretty
video.
recent, yeah.
Pretty recent, yeah. So
wow.
They had it all over the news, and they had video of the incident, and they have the guy.
Good.
So, yeah. So, onward and upward to Johnny. I know he's working hard and itching to get back, but
I'm sure he'll be back then, man.
Yeah.
A fighter's mentality is different. As you know, I'm sure you've been around and being a fighter yourself. The training alone, this is something that I always tell people who don't really follow the sport, just kind of show up to watch the fights or, watch the pay-per-view live stream, whatever. The training camp is the fight.
Absolutely.
That the work they put in ahead of time is so much more grueling than the fight itself, and that's by design so that the fight's easier, obviously. Absolutely. But people always miss that. So when you have a boxer saying he's going to make a recovery, I believe him, because Absolutely. I know if you can go through it, he's already been through mental struggles. Absolutely.
Yeah. And he he's a young, healthy guy, and I'm sure the great physique he's in helped with the recovery. The rest of us may not have pulled through it.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing. So that's cool, man. That's a stacked card for sure. So and we love that venue, man. I know you guys have had a show there too as well, right?
We've had one, and we really liked it too. They're great folks to deal with, and it's not a bad seat in the house. I like how the ring's in the round.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love a small, intimate show. I'm the same way with concerts. I don't like seeing a big arena show. I like the small clubs where you can get right up on the stage, and that's kind of how the Hollywood Casino at the Meadows Event Center feels to me. It's real tight. Everybody's losing their mind. It's super loud in there. It just feels a little crazy. That's the vibe for fights that I like.
No doubt. And a good location. It's easy to get out to. Sure. Easy parking, so we're excited. I think we're the last outdoor show of the season because it gets a little chilly in there.
A little bit this time of year.
The big crowd, though, you got the body heat to warm
you right up. Yeah, so. I don't think either of us is going to have a problem with that, which is exciting. It's nice to see combat sports in Pittsburgh coming back.
100%. And I honestly think that there's enough fighters in the area to just keep putting out these shows, so more people want to do it, I welcome them. The more promoters, the better. I don't think one's eating off the other one's table or plate or whatever, however you want to
exactly.
say. I think that there's enough guys that are hungry and want to do it, and there's honestly just not enough shows.
Yep. Ryan and I say this all the time, and that's that we can all win together. It doesn't have to feel like we're at each other's. I mean, you're sitting here on our podcast. It's not like you were like, Absolutely. No, I'm not going to come be on your podcast. Because, we don't have this sense of we're hurting each other. We have a sense of we're helping each other, which is exciting. And I don't know that we've seen that in the city before. Yeah. It's kind of a irony, I guess, when we're talking about how local fighters won't fight each other. And now we're saying that we need to play nice too. But it's true, man. There's space for all of us to win together. And besides, 100%. Two different sports.
No doubt. And, it's it's nice to have some promoters around. For a long time, Mike Akery kind of ran the show, and he was a great promoter. He brought Spatafora up, and in the early days, and Mike passed away, I want to say about 2 years ago. But he was a guy that would often lend some advice and stuff.
Sure.
And I remember when I was a fan. Going to his shows, I would always be oh, well, I wonder why they don't do this or wonder why they don't do that. But now I know why they don't do that stuff. As a promoter, sometimes the best fights that you think should happen don't happen for a variable number of reasons. Maybe just the fighters themselves, but maybe from a cost standpoint too. It doesn't work. So
that has been my degree is actually in journalism, and I covered MMA professionally for about a decade before I started working with Ryan in 247. So I had always seen things from the media side. Mm-hmm. That the money side, obviously, of promoting has been the biggest, Oz lifting the curtain reveal to me. That side of things, it blows my mind. because most people think like these promoters are just cashing in money. Like we're just having shit. We're getting so rich having fights because that's what slimy promoters do. Yeah. We're all so rich that we all have other jobs too. That's how rich fighting gets us. But it's what you said, those fights that don't come together maybe for financial reasons. As a fan and as a journalist, I remember looking at fights like that and being like, what are they doing? Like, why can't they just make that fight happen? It's so obvious, but there is sometimes this obvious reason, and it's purely financial. It's a business at the end of the day.
100%. 100%. And, you know, at the higher levels on pro boxing, like these fighters that are signed with, you know, Top Rank or Al Heyman or PBC or something, you know, there are rivalries and, you know, things that prohibit the fights being made on that level too, because, you know, only this promoter will work with Top Rank and Eddie Hearn, but he won't work with Heyman. And, you know, it's a lot of the stuff we've seen on the local levels is kind of transferred. You know, it's just the same thing on a higher level too. So, you know, I think if there's two fighters with promoters that don't work with each other, you know, somehow those fights can get made occasionally. You know, if it's a big enough money fight, they'll find a way to do it. But sometimes they don't, you know.
There's some stuff in boxing too. I remember talking to Gianta that just doesn't happen in MMA, where one opponent will help pay for his opponent to get there, or they pay what is called a slot fee, I think.
Or like a buy-in fight, and then they pay a slot fee. Yeah,
that stuff. When he was telling us about that, I'm like, wait. Like, people will pay you to let them fight? Like, what?
You're basically paying a guy to try to knock you out,
right?
You know,
I don't get that.
Pennsylvania is not a popular state for that because, you know, Serb won't match cream puffs. So, you know, you're rolling the dice on paying your opponent to knock you out. You know, you see it more in states, you know, Kentucky's, southern states, but up here not quite as much. But there are guys that really pad records doing that. You know, and they'll be 10-0, and then you look at who they fought, and you're like, oh, okay, they were paying out a lot of opponents. You know,
and people, you know, obviously people like you, that's a promoter's responsibility as well to know what you're getting into. I think we're lucky in Pennsylvania. I know a lot of people, Greg Serb, maybe they don't love the way he operates because he's difficult. Like you said, he won't approve cream puffs. He makes competitive fights, and sometimes that means that he denies a fight that you're trying to make. And that's not necessarily the best for somebody. But it's interesting to me in PA, it really does feel like he has fighter safety at the forefront. I think he genuinely cares. And at the end of the day, that matters.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we travel around a fair amount. And most of the time when I'm in another state, another commission, I wish I was back in PA. Feeling great, because you know what you're getting, and there's no, you know, gray area. And, you know, he's tough, he's firm, but he's fair, and he's like that with everybody. So, you know, he doesn't target certain promoters, I think. I think his approvals are pretty across the board, you know, so. And we've had many turned down over the years.
Yeah, I can imagine. Oh, yeah, us too. It happens all the time. And sometimes we disagree still, like even after it happens. But a lot of times I see it and I'm like, I get it, man. Yeah. I get it. Yeah. I got to give him that one. Like, I do appreciate that he cares. I mean, it feels good as much as it's a hassle. Like you said, when you're in other states, it feels good to come back to PA and know, like, this is going to be a well-run show that's fair and competitive. At the end of the day, we want to see good fights.
100%. And you don't want somebody in there who's, you know, past their prime or may have some damage that we don't know about. You know, we want to see everybody get home to their families. So, so he does do a great job with that. And I do think, you know, if you're an undefeated fighter and, you know, most of your fights were in Pittsburgh or Philly, it does hold a lot more clout.
Sure.
And it's because of him.
Nice.
You know, because of the approval process that he puts us through.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to circle back to the Billy Conn story, because I think that's fun, first of all. But did you like boxing in general before that?
You know, I did. I grew up, you know, there were great fights on TV. You know, I grew up watching Hagler and, you know, certainly Ray Mancini and, you know, in his prime. And then, you know, all the, you know, great fighters in the 80s. And Duran, seeing a lot of his fights. But, my dad wasn't like a diehard boxing fan. It was on in the house all the time when there was a big fight. But, we didn't go to fights or anything like that. But, that just knowing Khan was from the neighborhood and then hearing the story when I was probably a freshman in high school.
That's really cool.
Yeah. It always kind of stuck in the back of my mind. Then when I went to college, here I was kind of forced to stay busy and exercise in a boxing gym, and that's where it just kind of picked up. And I had a good trainer there, and had no great amateur career to speak of, but fought in the Golden Gloves, and just loved it. And then after college, lived in Boston for a while, and there were some gyms I went to there and just sparred and but didn't compete there, but so met a lot of people throughout the East Coast over the years in boxing. And then my cousin was good friends with Emmanuel Augustus, the Drunken Master, who was a famous journeyman. Mayweather said he gave him his toughest fight.
Oh, nice.
And and there was a fight in Detroit, and my cousin called me the one day. He's like, "Hey, Mike," he's like, "Manuel needs an extra cornerman. Do you want to come up?" So I went over there and worked the corner. It was on an HBO card.
Oh, that's
cool.
And
so that kind of really pulled me back into the training corner stuff. So, it was a great experience.
I don't know that boxer, but I'm going to assume he had a really unorthodox style.
The most. He would dance a lot and frustrate guys. And, his record, he had like 70 some fights, and it was probably something like 36-36, his record, with like 15 draws.
Wow.
But, had fought everybody under the sun. Beat a lot of undefeated fighters, and was on ESPN highlight a number of times for just wild dancing and punching and stuff. So.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
He had a fight of the year with Mickey Ward too.
Nice.
1 year too. So great fight.
I'm gonna have to look that up because that's interesting. I always like guys like that because it reminds me of. Do you know Cody Garbrandt? The name?
I've seen him fight. I certainly know who he is. I don't know him personally, but
yeah. But just know of him. Yeah, he told me because he actually lost as an amateur. He was undefeated as a pro all the way up through the UFC. Won the UFC bantamweight championship, and a lot of people saw him as an undefeated fighter, but in the region, like, we knew he lost as an amateur. Like, a lot of people remembered his loss as an amateur. And I remember talking to him before about that, and he said, like, amateur fighters would almost give him more trouble. Like, the higher up he got, the better the opposition got, the easier the fights were, because that's how he had trained his whole life.
Wow.
He had very, like, strict, like, Olympic boxing type training. So when he would see people do the things that you get taught to do, he would be very comfortable reacting to them. He's like, "Oh, that's what I've been doing my whole life." When you get against an amateur that's just kind of wild, reckless, not doing things by the book, that's when he's like, "I don't get these looks, That's not what I'm used to." So hearing this Augustus, Drunken Master, like, I could see why maybe Floyd said that was his hardest fight ever. I bet that's why. He's like, I literally never fought somebody who fought like this.
Awkward. And strange. I know. And it's like, there's a lot of fighters I've noticed around here that perform better at the 6, 8, and 10 round level than they do 4. In pro boxing, it's just like that. Those 4 rounders are very dangerous,
right?
Because the guys come out like a million miles an hour,
and don't stop.
And they don't stop. And if you get a bad headbutt or a good punch, they can clutch and hold, and all of a sudden you're up against the clock. You got to get this guy out. So it seems like the pace is a little different in the 6, 8, and 10s.
I could definitely see that. Boxing does seem like a sport where, and this is me, like, I'm really not a hardcore boxing guy. Maybe I'm wrong here. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it does seem like over the course of, like you said, a 10-rounder or 12-rounder, that the best guy by the end takes over. It really does seem like it usually levels out.
I agree, yeah, especially from a training standpoint.
Right.
Whoever has the stamina in those later rounds usually gets the edge there. And sometimes you'll have a more skilled fighter, but maybe they just don't condition well and stuff. I was a cut man for Sammy Vasquez, and Sammy living in Colorado Springs and training at that high altitude, I really saw a difference in him in those later rounds. Where his lung capacity and his stamina.
That's so huge.
It really is, and I think training at altitude is one of the best things you could possibly do.
Any fighter, yeah, absolutely. Any athlete in general.
No doubt.
Yeah, it's an interesting sport. I think people underestimate, and obviously as you've competed, but boxing is incredibly tiring cardio wise.
It is. Carl Froch, one of the super middleweight champs, he was saying one time in an interview that if he wasn't a professional boxer, he probably would be like a marathoner.
Oh, wow.
Because the amount of running that you have to do, or that he did.
Sure.
I see more guys doing the interval training, and that's something we, like my fighters, typically tend to do instead of going out and running like a 12-miler. It's like 3 minutes on, 1 minute off, 3 on, 1 off, because that's really what you're doing in the fight. So,
exactly.
I think training similar to what you're going to be doing in the ring is very important.
It makes so much sense. Now, are you a Steelers fan by chance?
Die hard.
Okay, good. So you'll definitely know the reference, but I'll always remember in Super Bowl 43. I hope I didn't get that wrong. The Cardinals Super Bowl that they won.
Mm-hmm.
James Harrison's interception return, 101 yards, whatever it ended up being. And he was like dead at the end of that run. If you remember, like he was like dead. And I was just thinking to myself, I was in track in high school at the time, maybe just early college at the time, in good shape. And I was like, he ran 100 yards and he acts like he just ran a marathon. And then the more I think about it, I'm like, he's trained to burst for like 5 seconds at a time and get a rest. 5 seconds at a time, get a rest. Like, he's not used to running 100 yards. So it's weird. It's exactly what you're saying about boxing. Like, if you're not training for a boxing fight, then you, like, a marathon runner wouldn't have good boxing cardio away. Exactly. Totally different.
Yeah, it's more of that interval. And I remember Holyfield talking about that for before the first Tyson fight. He said, he should just run, like 12, 15-mile runs. And for that one, he switched his training up and did the interval, and it really gave him more stamina in that fight. And
makes so much more sense. Yeah,
it really does. And I've also a big proponent of having that 1 minute break in training, especially in sparring. A lot of guys cut that down to 30 seconds because they think that they're, the punishing. I think they look at it like putting a weight on a bat and swinging the bat and taking it off. Like, your lungs would be stronger, I don't know, from only doing 30 seconds. But I really think you got to practice that minute of breathing between rounds, because that's what's going to happen in the fight.
Everybody gets a minute? Is that amateur and pro the same?
Amateur and pro,
okay.
Yeah, you get a minute. But a lot of gyms will cut it to 30 seconds in sparring.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I get the theory. I mean, I get it, but...
Yeah, I just think it's good to oxygenate the body, for that minute, and you're doing it in the fight. So it's
get used to it.
It's
right.
It's good to practice what you're going to do.
I always thought, see what you think of this idea. It's never going to happen, but this has always been one of my ideas. It's like, they should do this. I always thought heavyweights should get a little longer. Light heavyweights should get a little long, like not insanely longer, but maybe like a minute 20 for heavyweights. You know what I mean? Like
I don't think any of them would complain.
Exactly, because and this might be more so MMA. A lot of heavyweight boxers are in insanely good shape. I think of Tyson Fury. He's like a freaking lightweight, never gets tired, insane speed. But in MMA, you see a lot of heavyweight fights that by the end, these dudes are just walking with concrete shiz, just slugging. You know what I mean? I'm like, these guys could really benefit from just a little more time between rounds. I think we'd have better fights. Like,
they would get off the stool a little bit more energetic, I think,
And that's what people want to see. They want to see the big boy. They don't want to see something that looks like Jim's pub down the road at 3 a.m. You know what I mean?
Two guys slobbing and holding on to each other. Yeah, no, some of these big heavyweights too, it does get that way. But it was a quick work for Wilder the other night. I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
Wow.
I did. I was going to bring that up, actually, because I felt like that fight flew under the radar pretty hard. I'll be honest, I didn't know it was happening. I saw a video of the knockout. I was like, Deontay Wilder fought? And got a ridiculous first-round knockout. Has anybody, I know everybody's going to say Tyson, but nobody hits harder than Wilder in the history of the sport.
I agree.
It's crazy.
Oleg and I were having this conversation last night. I mean, the distance of where his punches are coming from. And when
that one was nuts.
And that was a short one.
It was so short. Yeah. That's exactly what I thought. I'm like, he looks like he just...
And he's only 212 pounds.
Yeah.
He's not like, that Hellenius was over 260, I think. And him just
Didn't
a
matter.
house.
Didn't matter.
Yeah, he walked right into that.
What, like... You being a trainer, you being involved, is there, I always thought so at least, there's a God-given whatever, there's a natural element to that kind of power, right? Like, some dudes just got it.
Some guys are just heavy-handed, and some guys just can, and there's other guys that aren't as heavy-handed, but, they can learn to position their body to hit a little bit harder and they really work on it. Especially a lot of these European fighters, because they come over and they're used to a high touch output amateur style.
Right.
And the transition to the pro game, you got to punch a little bit harder and sit down on your punches and kind of pick and choose your shots. But a lot of those guys, their body shifting is so good that it's an easy transition,
right?
To it. But you can't kill everybody with every shot, or else you'll be
exactly
gassed by the second, third round.
You get Wilder putting Fury, which when he popped back up from that knockdown,
it's like a zombie.
That I've never seen anything like it.
I know.
In all my years watching fights of all levels, you never see somebody get pasted like that and get up and be fine. That made no sense.
And came right back and got right
won the rest of that
yeah,
round.
Yeah.
Like, what?
I know.
How is that remotely possible?
Yeah. And kudos to the ref for letting that one go.
Oh, yeah. And see, that's a huge difference. In MMA, he would have pounced on top of him, never would have had a chance to recover. You would never see a comeback like that in MMA. You can't.
Yeah, no, I know it's exciting to see. Well, Wilder's a lot of people say he's a one-trick pony, and to some degree, he is, but that trick is deadly. Yeah. The fight I'd really like to see would be Wilder and Usyk, because Usyk is crafty. That if he avoids that punch, I think he can do some serious damage and take him into the later rounds and wear him out. But there's that punch,
Yeah, it still feels like heavyweights are where it's at and where it's always been in boxing. The big guys are just, it's a different level of fun, right? When they're in there.
It is, and they're skilled. There's a lot of good skilled guys. I mean, I'm a huge Tyson fan, but I do have to say I thought that in his prime, they were soft, in the 80s. Nice. I mean, the Tony Tubbs, I like Tony Tubbs, but I mean, they weren't on the same level as what we're seeing today with these guys,
Yep.
As big, strong, and skilled, and it's a totally different game.
How is that conversation in boxing? Because in MMA we hear a lot of the same thing. Everybody wants to talk about the GOAT, the best fighter of all time, and it's always like you'll hear guys say early era guys, maybe Chuck Liddell, John Jones, like George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva. But Anderson Silva, we'll take him for example. He's a perfect example. Started losing a lot towards the end of his career, and then a lot of people are like, well, maybe he's not the GOAT because he started losing a lot. But a lot of other people say you got to take them at their best in their prime and judge them based off that.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel about it in boxing? Because I'm sure a lot of guys, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong again, but I feel like a lot of guys could probably beat Muhammad Ali nowadays.
I agree. I agree.
But
100%.
what he did at the time was unheard of.
Absolutely. So I think really light heavyweight down, you could make comparisons that the all-time greats could or probably would beat some of the guys today, because but the heavyweights, it's a little bit different, because now we got cruiserweight, bridgerweight, heavyweight, and Muhammad Ali would really probably be a cruiserweight today.
Smaller for
sure.
Yeah.
Today. So while I think he would beat a lot of guys, I just can't see him beating a Fury or Wilder just because of the size alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of tough to compare those.
It
but
is.
Back in the day, like a Harry Greb, he fought everybody.
The other legend.
Yeah, the other legend. Up and down. All these divisions, fought the toughest of the tough. There's no video of the guy, which is
That's unfortunate.
It's so unfortunate. But, he certainly took on all comers. So you wonder where a guy like that would be today.
Yeah. It's fun to speculate. I love stuff like that. Like, I'm big in the hypothetical discussions for sure.
I saw the interview. You had a great interview with Dalton, and you guys were touching on that. You just mentioned about Chuck Liddell and stuff, So it is. But I do agree with you guys that, like, fighters have evolved now to a much higher level. I don't know if that's, the training techniques or what, but it's interesting,
To be fair, I think it goes across sports. Like, I have a Jack Lambert tattoo. I'm huge, like my dad was the biggest Steelers fan, so I grew up just loving those 70s teams and thought Jack Lambert's the best ever. But when I watch tape, like, I can't imagine him being who he was in today's NFL. He weighed 210, 220. He's such a tiny middle linebacker, just weight-wise. Obviously, he's like 6'4", 6'5", and maybe he would figure it out, but when you watch a lot of the older guys, you just can't imagine them being what they are in today's NFL.
Yeah,
like, that's all sports.
No doubt. He is a good example of what if our fighter Lubomir wears a Lambert jersey to the ring each fight. Loves him.
Now he's my favorite fighter.
He's one of the best. So intensity can't be matched with Lambert.
Oh no. I mean, he should have been a fighter. He should have been a mixed martial artist or a boxer, I think.
yeah, no doubt about it. But yeah, it's hopefully the Steelers turn the corner a little bit here.
What do you think?
I think it's a long season.
Okay, yeah. You're not buying the hype of the recent Buccaneers win as turning a corner or anything.
Unfortunately, I mean, I hope they can salvage it, but I mean, we've gone through so many good years, and you go through these cycles. In anything, So I think we're in a down cycle now, but hey, I hope they prove me wrong.
That's the other benefit of my dad, like being a huge Steelers fan. He's like, I've seen this before. Like in my lifetime, honestly, I've known pretty good Steelers teams almost my whole lifetime of caring about the sport.
Yeah.
This is my first time seeing a team that's like, ooh, not very good this year. Like it's different for me, but the older timers have been through this. It gets better.
Yeah. We've been through the Cliff Stout years.
Exactly.
And all the
Bobby Brister.
And, but sometimes these guys do surprise you, So we actually had Najee come by the gym a couple of times.
Nice. That's awesome.
He's a great guy, and he's a big boxing fan, too.
I did not know that. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, he was training at a gym in Houston with a promoter friend, Marshall Kaufman, and Marshall referred him up to us, and he came a few times and worked out. And
that's so cool.
Yeah,
nice.
Fast hands.
I was going to say, does he have hands?
Yeah, he does.
Nice.
He brought Mark Robinson the one time too, the one rookie.
Okay.
And Mark was first time ever at his gym. He was really athletic.
He looked good in preseason and everything. I was impressed with him. I was happy to see him on the active roster this past Sunday.
Yeah.
So he got a couple reps on special teams, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
Those guys are, as you know, I don't need to tell you, but freakish athletes in general. I've heard of a lot of Steelers boxers. Like I remember Bud Dupree was working with Richie Cannellino a lot.
That's right.
I think Devin Bush was as well. Steven Nelson. They just not only like are they fast and strong and everything, but athletically they can pick up new ideas so much better than the average Joe. Like you tell them something one time and they're like, "Yeah, I get it. My body. I know how to use my body." Like they just get it better.
Absolutely, just the weight shift.
Yep.
Especially getting their core behind punches and stuff. But in terms of the time, the 3 minutes and one, they are used to the quick, explosive.
I can imagine gassing being a problem.
Yeah, they're used to those 30-second bams or 10-second,
Yeah.
explosions.
Well, I gotta ask, and this is like sacrilegious after we've talked about all these amazing boxers, but Le'Veon Bell, what do you think of his boxing career?
I'm embarrassed. I didn't see his first fight.
It didn't look bad.
I'm
not gonna lie,
yeah.
It didn't look bad. Yeah. I was surprised.
And he won by knockout or decision?
No, he knocked him out good too. Like it was a legit knockout. It was a good punch. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, hey, if Gastineau did it back in the day, Ryan Gastineau, but a lot of guys haven't had the crossover success, but hey, you never know unless you try, right?
How do you navigate that? Because that's such a part of our culture nowadays. These Jake Paul, Logan Paul fights, Le'Veon Bell, like we see so much of that now. Is there an interest for you in setting up a fight like that?
Well, we just fought on a card in New York a couple weeks ago, and John Gotti III was on the card. He was a MMA fighter.
I was going to say, when I used to work at Flow Combat that streamed MMA, and we had a couple of his fights on our cards too. He was good. He was a good MMA fighter. Yeah.
Yeah, he showed up. I mean, he didn't have an entourage. He made weight, very professional, nice guy, and brought a ton of people, of people. And I guess on the pay-per-view too. So someone like him who is a real fighter, but, a little bit of a novelty, I would certainly put that on a card of ours in the future. But I think, in terms of the Jake Paul and stuff, I think it's good for the sport. I kind of did a 180 on him when he fought in Cleveland. He gave like all that money to those other people, which is, I mean, really an awesome thing to do. And if he brings awareness and he brings, new interests to the sport, let him do it,
That's my thing right there. And that might be because I'm more on the promoting side now, but like any influx of new fans is ultimately going to be a good thing.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to have guys who start to see Jake Paul, but then stick around and become the diehards like you. Like that's how it starts. You had Billy Conn, a story about him stopping a robbery is what really got you hooked. It wasn't his fighting. It was this novelty thing that he did. Yeah. So it's kind of the same situation.
It brings people in. Absolutely. Steve Cunningham, two-time cruiserweight world champ, lives here in Pittsburgh, has some great fighters himself. He was in camp with Jake Paul, and he said for the amount of time the guy's been at it, it's impressive.
Yeah. He looks good to me too. I mean, I'm not a boxing savant by any means, but you can tell when somebody knows what they're doing or at least trains. He certainly looks the part to me.
Yeah. Yeah, so it will be interesting when they step him up. Though,
Oh yeah.
Will he catch the person, or will he be totally exposed?
Is he fighting Anderson Silva?
That's what I.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought so. Yeah, that's happening.
Up.
Nice.
And Silva did not look bad in his pro boxing.
No.
Who did he beat? He beat someone.
Yeah, and I totally should know it.
Cesar Chavez.
There you go. Yeah. Chavez Jr.
Chavez Jr. Wow, and that's an impressive win because Chavez Jr. had a ton of pro fights.
Had some accolades for sure.
Yeah.
Everybody said, he's a shell of himself and whatnot, which I'm sure to a degree. But
that's right. But he was a world champion. I think at junior middleweight. I mean, he gave the former middleweight champ. He had him in real trouble in the Sergio Martinez. He had him in trouble in the late rounds, and he was always kind of known as an undisciplined fighter.
Right.
Which was a knock against him, but. Certainly was a puncher, so that's an impressive win for Silva.
It's a good win.
Yeah.
So I think, for Jake Paul, that's a good fight.
Yeah, that is a good fight. I'll be tuning in.
I was just going to say, I can't help but get excited about him. Like Le'Veon Bell, same deal. He's fighting a former UFC fighter next, Uriah Hall.
I didn't recognize that.
Yeah, funny enough, everybody called Uriah Hall the next Anderson Silva when he was coming up.
Wow.
Very similar build, very explosive striking, big knockout power kind of guy. So Le'Veon's got that's a hard test, man.
Yeah.
Wow. Even though he's not a boxer, he's been training his entire life.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that there's enough time to catch up to somebody like that.
No, you're right. Now, is that on the same card?
I don't know. Danny, do you know?
It is. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
I got to get that card.
Yeah. I'm going to tune into that one.
I hate that I'm excited for that, but I can't deny it. That's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think locally, like the fight you need to do is like Mark Madden versus a random caller. That would be the ultimate ticket seller.
He's hilarious.
Oh, I love it. I love when people get upset about him.
Oh man,
it's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, I used to listen to Matt on the radio home from work, and I mean, some of his comments to some of these callers are just so priceless,
dude. So he does get some of the most ridiculous calls ever. Like if you were in his shoes, you would react exactly the same. Like, some of the stuff these people say, these reactions. Like I literally just saw a tweet today about people that were at the Steelers game against the Buccaneers. When Mitch came in, they were booing him like crazy. Get off the field, Mitch. Throws a touchdown, and suddenly they're Mitch's biggest fan. Love Mitch. That Mitch should take the job back from Kenny. Like, dude, fans are the most fickle creatures ever. It's so crazy.
I know. It's ridiculous. And they love you when you're up and tell you everything you did wrong when you're down.
That's it. And maybe no sport more than boxing and MMA where that's the case, man. And that sucks. It's always sucky to me to see these fighters who everybody's all behind and they lose once and suddenly nobody cares about them anymore. It's like, what?
Exactly.
Everybody loses a fight if you're in the game long enough.
No doubt. And you look at top guy in boxing right now, Canelo has a couple, couple losses, and a recent loss, absolutely. And you look at who he fought though, and like who's going to judge that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Even local guys, I always respect the guys that step up and take a loss. It would be like, can you imagine going to Seven Springs every weekend and going down the Bunny Hill? You know, I mean, at some point you got to challenge yourself.
Yep.
And some guys it takes a little longer to do that than others, but
that's a good way to put it. I like that. So with this being like primarily we have an MMA audience, obviously. For people who want to get into boxing and especially local boxing, like who are some guys that you would say keep an eye on these fighters because they might be the next guys to go to the next level?
In terms of amateur, pro, or either
we'll do pros.
Well, certainly I'd say the closest right now is Oleg Dogun. Oleg's ranked number 3 by the WBA, and we're real proud of him. He's just an absolute workhorse. So I think he's the closest to getting the big shot. But also I think guys like Matt Conway has been in some tough fights. I mean, he gets a win here, he's going to be in a real good position for another big fight somewhere. Mm-hmm. Rosie is another guy up and coming. Spell, Johnny Spell is another guy that is really exciting, fun to watch, and undefeated as well. So I would say those. And we just had a tough fight in New York with Lubo Pinchuk. Luba's now 14-4-1, but the cruiserweight division, he gets 2 more wins, he's right back in it.
Nice.
So I would say that's the real stable of guys. Bill Hutchinson has a good record. He'd be in a position to get a big fight coming up to soon too. With his record, I think he's in a good position. So I would say those guys really, in terms of next level type fights, they're all going to be in a good spot, or they put themselves in a good spot.
Mm-hmm. I know Hutch pretty well over the years. I've gotten to know him well, and he's an awesome guy. Love Hutch. I will say he is a guy that I look at and just, it seems like he does more work than there's hours in a day. Like, got his law degree, runs a very successful business, undefeated pro boxer as well. It's like, dude, how are you doing that? Like, he's one of the most driven individuals that I've ever met, and it's just so impressive. Like, his career in boxing, it's like, if he was only focusing on boxing, how good would he be?
Yeah. It's amazing. Most of the guys locally do have to work multiple jobs, and just because, unfortunately, on these club circuits, it just doesn't pay.
Not happening.
Yeah. So kudos to Bill, and going to school and doing all he did, it's a lot of work, and you have to be dedicated to do that. So it's really a grind, I think, for all these guys, and it's exciting. It's exciting to see where the sport's going. I mean, in the past, there's only been 1 or 2 guys you could probably mention. Here, I had a whole group I just threw at you. I had to scratch my brain.
Awesome.
I hope I'm not leaving somebody out here. I know I am. I
was going to say, you'll inevitably forget somebody when it comes to stuff like that.
I know. There's so many good fighters, around here. So if I did miss anybody, forgive me.
Yeah, I'm sure they will, man. And so for anybody interested, come out, Integrity Fighting Promotions. I'm trying to remember the full
Fighter Management. Not a real promotional name,
okay,
but Integrity Fighter Management. We're doing it at the Meadows Hollywood Casino on the 29th, 2 weeks coming up. So
thanks to people like you, and I would like to think we're part of the conversation as well, like getting combat sports back in Pittsburgh, man. It's an exciting time. It really is. So for fans who haven't checked it out, go check them out. Come to our show, and then go see some boxing the following Saturday. That's a perfect one too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, appreciate you guys having me on. A lot of fun, and looking forward to the show too.
For sure, man. Thanks for stopping out.
Thanks, brother.
See you, people.
Appreciate it.